You're listening to the podcast on jasonsolomons.com, and I'm thrilled to be joined by my old friend Toby Jones, who is starring in Matteo Garrone's Tale of Tales, a fantastical compendium of 17th century Neapolitan fairy tales. Toby, you play a king who falls in love with a flea. First time for that.
First time I've done flea love, yes. I've done other kinds of love, but yeah, I'm glad to tick it off the list, to get it out of the way.
It's a wonderful performance from you. I really loved it. When I first saw you, it was in Cannes actually last year, doing the kind of falling in love with a flea, a bit of clowning with the fly. I thought that this is exactly what you should be doing. I really enjoyed your performance here.
Oh, thanks. It felt a bit like I'm being returned to where I trained. In Paris, where that kind of physical comedy, where with being bothered by a fly is like a classic Lazzi, classic gag that you'd have learnt as a piece of business.
Yeah, and it wasn't. You picked it up and ran with it. Did you get a lot of freedom from Matteo Garrone? I think he's a genius director, but he did Gomorrah, which was a compendium of tales, but about the modern mafia in Naples. What sort of director is he for things like that, especially when he's directing in the English language?
Yes, I mean he's like a lot of directors. You get the feeling he's got natural authority as a director. So he's constantly talking about how much freedom he's giving you, but you sense that it's working with him very circumscribed. That said, I was amazed at the quality of the CGI in it, because it felt very chaotic. The film set, as Italian film sets often do, they're not chaotic. They're just totally different culture, film culture to our own, and they're actually organised, but just organised in a very much less sort of industrialised way than we are, and it's much more sort of. Anyway, it's more full of life in a way. It's more fun, and
the food better.
And the catering is of a far higher order, and it's prioritised in a way that I'd like to see introduced more over here.
This is something that we can do with the Brexit debate. We can introduce film catering.
Stop bringing in film catering, yeah.
I mean, a fantastic cast that you joined: Salma Hayek, John C. Reilly, Vincent Cassel, Shirley Henderson. Although it's separate tales, did you get to hang out together, or did you sort of turn up as one tale was winding up?
He's chosen 3 tales. I mean, in the original collection of tales, there are very, very early versions of Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty. Things that were the source material for those stories. But he's chosen 3 that won't be familiar to anyone in the UK. And what he's done was that he structured the film so that the 3 separate tales, which are brutal, They're whimsical on one level, but they're really brutal. He's interlocked them so that we had there's a couple of crossover scenes where the sort of the tales hinge on each other, but within the film itself they're intercut.
Yeah, because they are, as you say, they're brutal. And you kind of think, well, what relevance does this have to Gomorrah? Why has he gone and done these tales of 17th century fairy tales? But they are so sort of soaked in blood and passion and betrayal and death and tragedy that you think, well, actually, this is the stuff upon which Naples is founded.
Well, I mean, the sequence with Shirley Henderson, where she, through a complicated set of circumstances, decides that she wants to be flayed alive. I took my kids to see it. They're teenagers, and they couldn't believe that something that started off so funny and pleasurable and beautiful, could suddenly become so shocking and horrific. Particularly the beautiful way she plays it, and Hayley Carmichael, the way they play that stuff is so tender, and yet there he is filming something that could be right out of Gomorrah, some terrible torture scene.
Well, you mentioned your children, and you have a teenage daughter, and your king in this film has a sort of young daughter as well, who he sort of gives, I'm not going to spoil it, gives away to an ogre, which is spirited away to an ogre in one of those great medieval type of kind of mad bets. Did you? What were you thinking that as someone who has a daughter, that giving away your kingdom for on a whim like that? Do you take things like that as an actor and go to the personal?
Well, I think I probably did, but I've only realised that in retrospect, looking at the film a second time the other day. I was thinking, what is this tale really about? I mean, you're playing a father with a daughter, a sort of negligent father, And then you realise, I think, really what this story is about is not about a king falling for a flea. That's just about saying that someone who's so absorbed in their own concerns, they fail to realise that their daughter has grown up and, isn't a daughter, is a person, and is a person in their own right, and proves to be an incredibly resourceful woman, an incredibly dynamic, fearless woman, while the parent is becoming increasingly more like regressing to being like a child. And this felt like, wow, that's not so strange. That feels very instructive, in a contemporary for any father. So, although I hope to be more on top of things with my daughters than this king is, I can relate to the fact that somehow one often can be stuck in nostalgia for an earlier version of your child. You sort of go, I don't want you to grow up. I want you to be that person that I knew when you were 5, 7, 9, and always in the past, because you're not living through their future,
What do your kids think of you? Kind of, because of all the British actors, it's wonderful to see. But you do such many and varied stuff, from Captain Mainwairing to the king that falls in love with a flea to to being on a boat with Naomi Watts. Do they recognise their father as each of these people? Do you share with them I assume are very joyous experiences, the many characters that you play?
I think they remind me a bit of myself. My father's an actor; he's 89 now, and I remember it was just my father. Like any other person, that it's a bit inconvenient. I have to go away to work a lot of the time, and when their friends go, "Oh, that's really cool, he's in Captain America. Oh, that's really cool, he's in Harry Potter," I don't think I'm doing them a disservice by saying I don't think they see it as particularly cool. I think they see it as, that's another time he's not going to be around. Right. So I don't think there's that kind of... The weird thing about being a child of an actor or anyone involved in films stuff is, I'm sure your children will feel the same way, is that there's a kind of... It's not as glamorous. There's something of the romance isn't there. It's a more practical, work-like thing. It's not... So... I think they like some of the films I'm in, but I don't think they're kind of wowed and dazzled by it in a way that you might expect.
I mean, in Harry Potter, you're sort of scarcely recognisable. Yes, it has to be said. I hope not. As Dobbie the house elf, one of my favourite characters in the whole thing. But I mean, when you're going for the big American stuff, the superhero stuff, the Captain Americas of this world, you're the only one who hasn't got a superpower in that, though. You must be sort of a bit gutted. Why can't I be Spider-Man?
You say I don't have a superpower, but you'll have noticed that I took the precaution of uploading my entire personality into a computer, which is a far more useful superpower than anything you see them. They're busy flying around the place, beating each other up. I very stealthily just uploaded my personality. I'm now there for the entire franchise. I can be there. I can appear in any version of that script, any configuration, any iteration of Captain America I can be in.
Because I went to see Captain America. It wasn't about Captain America. It was about Ant-Man and Spider-Man and Rocket Man.
It's an extraordinary franchise. I mean, when I did the first film, which I think they'd done Iron Man and Thor at that point. And they were still, you still felt, how are they going to make a character out of this guy with a shield? And the confidence with which they discussed how the franchise was going to build up, how it was, what it's become now.
The universe, they call it.
Yeah. And I remember them saying to me, "Welcome to the universe," and I was going, right, I don't really know what you're talking about. Now it's very clear what they're talking about. They're taking over this universe,
Which is good for you because you're in all of them.
Not the latest one, but maybe, who knows the future.
Because you could be in the Avengers Assemble universe is the same as the Captain America universe, is the same as all of them. They're all in all of each other's films
exactly,
now. Yeah. A bit like the Tale of Tales, but without the CGI.
Exactly.
Toby, it is wonderful to see it going so well. I loved Tale of Tales in a kind of prickly sort of way, because it is bonkers and brilliant and balmy, but in the very best of ways. And you falling in love with a flea shall remain with me for a very long time.
Thank you, Jason.